Hello everyone once again, and here I have Cobra Wargaming, who hosts his own channel here on YouTube, which I quite like. I consider Cobra Wargaming to be one of the cool designer kids out there. I think he does some fantastic work in regards to his own board game designs. He's doing different things with World War One, as well as playing around with other stuff like a Roman one that I'm not sure if the progress is. According to Cobra, he might be giving us a little bit of a channel update on his. And I am, of course, Jinx from Fortress Jinx, where I just do a little bit of everything too. So I have my own board game I'm designing. But today's topic we're going to discuss is neutrals and kind of diplomacy, but with a heavier emphasis on neutrals. We're not exactly sure what we're going to talk about because we're going to be talking, in relation within kind of oriented around Global War 36, but we might go on a little bit and talk about our own projects and how we're implementing a few odds and end things. So Cobra Wargaming, I'm going to ask you a question here to start us off at, and let's see. So how do you feel like the neutrals are representing Global War 36? Do you think they did a good job in representing them neutrals here?
All right. Yeah. So I think overall, global war has existed for a while, and the neutrals work. There's never really been a time I feel that anyone's complained that maybe they were too overpowered or like terrible and needed a complete rework.
Mm.
But they definitely historical board gaming went for a more, I guess, board gaming approach in terms of balancing, making sure the neutrals are completely balanced. It's like and don't have much of an effect, or that a major power like say Germany or Great Britain would want to like plan too much about neutrals. So whether that be something like giving a neutral a smaller army that whereas in reality they may have had a larger one, or even say one big thing that people have talked about is how in Global War 1936 version 3, how all neutrals across the board are capped out with three IPCs or three, yeah,
Right, right.
IPCs. They don't even like so larger powers like Spain don't exceed that, except for I
That's
think
true.
the Dutch are the only ones that have an excess.
That's true.
Um,
That's true, yeah.
yeah. So and that can definitely like affect stuff like I would especially say Spain because they were while not like an economic powerhouse, they were definitely a bigger power in places in
Mm-hmm.
some South American countries. So that has a bit of an effect. And then even in terms of how neutrals will like work nowadays. So I think like when a neutral goes to war and they're controlled by a different power, not fully aligned, the
Yeah.
fact that they only get a recruitment role based on the amount of territories they have instead of maybe using their IPCs. So like let's say Romania, they get a factory, but if they're at war with the Soviets, they can't use that factory. They just have to
Mm.
rely on getting a few militia through
Mm-hmm.
recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something um, that could be looked at. And then the last kind of note that I have on some neutrals, and this kind of comes into map design, is that some neutrals seem like they can be a little too much of a pushover when it comes to how the game works. I guess it's hard to explain it that way, but how, let's say, Romania is a decently sized nation
Yeah,
in
yeah.
reality. And
Mm-hmm.
something I've seen Soviet players do before is they try to conquer Romania in the early 30s. And
Mm-hmm.
while this um, would have probably been a brief-ish conflict, the Soviets would have, if they mustered the forces, could have taken on Romania. The fact that the Soviets can pile a ton of infantry and artillery, whatever, right on the border, and then fall into Romania and just one turn wipe out Romania, and then that's the Romanian-Soviet War ended.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think, and it doesn't provide for say like Lend Lease or the Romanians to kind of, or whoever's controlling the Romanians to put up a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where they succeeded is in places like Greece or Finland, where comparable in size, but the territories have been cut up a little bit. So it
Yeah.
provides for, say, somebody to move into a territory and then the remaining one or two territories to kind of sit there and either receive some aid from the allies or Axis or like receive maybe an intervention where you could march in with your own forces and defend that territory. So yeah, there's definitely some wins that they got, and then there's some things that are like left to be appreciated or wanted.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, and I think we should also state. Okay, wait. Before we get into that, you said USSR conquer Romania in early 30s.
I meant to say early 40s. So like
Okay, just
I
double
think they
checking.
can attack. Yeah, I think they can attack in 1939, the
Yeah,
latter half.
that's right.
And
That's right.
so yeah, yeah,
I just wanted to clarify that just in case people are coming back and be like, which
yeah,
game were you actually talking about?
yeah.
So I agree with you quite a bit. And now I think from the perspective of the designers, so there are limitations on what it is. And also keep in mind that this is a I'm not saying this to you. I'm just saying this broadly to myself as well as everybody else who's watching. Like, we get it. We get that this is a big board game with tons of variables and such, and we understand that it's a game in development too. Like, it might be version 6 before things are like, this is actually pretty damn fantastic with the way it is too. So we're not being critical for the sake of being critical, and we totally get that this is a game work in progress. Like me and you, Cobra, like we totally on the same page in this one. We're saying like these are things that could be improved, but it's like we get why they haven't been thus far. It's not criticism. Just I want to say this just in case we're not trying to step on people's toes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I agree with you. I think first of all you're saying about well about how a lot of territories are capped. Sorry, a lot of neutral their income are capped at 3. Even yeah, okay. So a lot of territories are capped at 3, which is not super representative. And so I would say like the 3 actually is an annexing nations IPP withdrawal from that territory. Like it's never from the perspective of if Brazil joined the Allies or Argentina joined the Allies or whatever it is, they would probably contribute a lot more. But when Finland only gives 3 IPPs, it's kind of from the perspective, as far as I can tell, from the person that captures Finland, that's what they should get. So I almost feel like the developers should say if it's peacefully attained either by somebody attacking them and they become aligned, that IPP value should almost be double or something like that, right? So Brazil would get 6 instead of 3. But if Brazil captures Argentina, Argentina would just give them $3. And I think that's the way it should be more representative of how they go. And even if it's aligned, say Russia attacks Iran, so Iran should go from I think it's $3 that they're supposed to get. So they should have a double of 6 for the meantime, and they should be able to spend that money and use them as they need to. And one last thing I would say in regards to neutrals, this is kind of an aside point that I got to led to. It's not directly related to yours. Is they've kind of lost some autonomy. It's like, haha, they're not defended from this side, so if I attack them this way, I'll get a nice landing zone and be able to capture this area. I think it should almost be neutrals have a little pool of troops. You could put them wherever. But once they're attacked, then the person that takes them over says, okay, pause. I'm going to reposition all these troops. I know there's exceptions for surprise attacks, but for the most part, it's like, the Russians are massing up on our northern border. We have 3 infantry defending against the British coming from the south. Like, they should have this opportunity to quickly like reposition their stuff and place them on that border prior to combat, because they can see it's kind of coming, right? For the most part, I think it's realistic to expect that they can kind of foresee that there's a road being built here and there's military units kind of moving into the area. So yeah, that gives them a sense of more life.
Yeah, those are some definitely like pretty cool points that
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even considered.
Mm-hmm.
And even I like the IPC kind of increase, because that could even work with historical board gaming's system where you have peacetime and wartime income. So maybe
Exactly.
neutrals would be printed like maybe a number next to their kind of like, as you said, annexable
Mm-hmm.
value, where it would
Right.
say
Right.
like a whatever it is, and that would be the wartime. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
controlling it, that's how much money this neutral is making.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Like you'd have
And
a
I
number in.
also, yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say I like the whole redeployment thing, because it
Mm.
is kind of funny to think with some nations how like you could build up on a border and they're just kind of gonna sit up there in the north and wait
Yeah.
around for you to come
Yeah.
to them.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I think the only exception could be like amphibious assaults, because those are a little bit more surprising sometimes, right? But yeah, if it's a land assault, you should be able to see them kind of coming for at least a little bit, right? Maybe not if I mean, you can make exceptions, but if you want to make exceptions, then it gets more complex. It's nice to have a blanket general rule, but you could be like, if cavalry or tanks or something with a movement R2 are attacking that area, then you don't get to redeploy. But it's much easier just to be like blanket statement, they get to redeploy. In regards to this whole idea of split territory, so I really, because I'm working on my own game, I really sympathize with the developers because they're like, okay, so you want, you think, not you, but in general, people think Romania should be split because it's a big country and, it's equivalent size of, say, I don't know, Finland, and Finland gets 3 territories, but Romania only gets 1. That's kind of bullshit, or whatever people might say. So maybe the issue there is like, so in the scope of the game, it's going to take you 3 turns, which is a year and a half to capture Romania. I mean, come on, right? So there is that little argument there too on the flip side of develop. But I've found a solution. I'm not going to share with you guys on how to do that.
Yeah, I've yet to think of something for that, because I think I definitely learned that with developing the Roman Empire game, where I just I wanted like territories, like you can really just in depth all these little zones, but it's like it's just I actually had to like remake an entire movement system because it just gets far away from the normal axis now as one.
It does.
But
well, you see a lot of customizations now where it's like, I mean, I think they're good ideas, but they're like, if you're non-combat moving, you could actually move double, and if you're combat moving, then you only move your set amount, and so that's a nice workaround as well too. But then the problem is too, like, so now I don't know, a good example, say Norway has been split a few more times, or France has been split a few more times. From the defending perspective, they're like, this sucks now because now I have to defend X more amount of territories just to satisfy your need for having a more, like whatever territory, right? So it causes some issues.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
Yeah, so that's the issue with, that's why I say we sympathize, because from the designer perspective, it's like, it'd be awesome, but it causes a lot of extra problems.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, yeah. And you can even see that with, like, say Norway. I really like, Norway's, being split into 3 territories, because again, like, I like these dynamic, like, you got to capture the north and the south. But then when it comes down to like the niche of, I have German troops stationed in southern Norway, and I want them to move to Finland to help attack the Soviets.
Yeah.
3 turns later.
It's like year and a half later, they finally arrive.
Yeah. So they're good and then the bad of that. But
so on that note, there's one thing that maybe people should stay away from, like maybe HPG should stay away from, maybe Axis Knowledge should not go into, is putting a fixed number on stuff, being like 1 turn is half a year. Like maybe they shouldn't do that. Maybe. Like, it's nice, thematically nice, but if you leave it more ambiguous, people will be like, well, it's not half a year, because war, they kind of set their own timeline. It's like, this is where Germany roughly is in regards to Russia, so this makes it roughly this year, and it's actually where you are in the game that sets the year as opposed to the year setting the game, because there's been too many people I've played with who are like, oh, you're going a little bit early, aren't you? It's not even 1939 yet. It's like, I mean, you're not forced to go that year if you feel it's optimal to go early,
Yeah, so. I definitely like. I remember Global 40. It was like ambiguous in the sense.
That's right.
Like there was a lot of debate over that, because I remember with like friends like, how long are these turns? I'm like, I think some people said a couple months. They're like, okay, well this fleet's been like traveling the globe for like 2 years now. But,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like how long did it take in the Russo-Japanese War to get the Soviet fleet from here all the way to there, going around Africa? And I think it was 6 months, I think, maybe 4 months,
something like that.
And that's like not even one game in this, and they go the whole distance around there. And I know they probably move a little bit slower, and then they had to recall in, I think, Madagascar or something like that. But even so, right, like you'd think that they can move a little bit quicker. So there's other things, there's counter arguments to that. It's like, well, they're not actually moving their fleet, they're actually moving all their naval supplies and building up their infrastructure in these ports that they're going to get closer to. So there is that kind of counter argument. But in regards to neutrals, what I wanted to kind of tag on to is you mentioned how, or I think you mentioned, unless this is in the preamble, how certain nations might be a little underrepresented in regards to what military they start off on. So I think when a person is developing a board game, oftentimes they go like, okay, so every 30,000 troops, you get 1 infantry type unit or something like that. And that's okay, and I get that way of doing things, but I think you get into problems where it's like, well, now North Africa has 3 million troops and Russia has, only 6 million. Like, that's way too many troops for Africa and way. So my rationale I'm working this out with is it's not how many troops there are, it's how much it costs to supply those troops that unit represents. I don't know if we've talked about this before.
I think that it was mentioned. It might have been in one of your conversations with Wintermute on like militia, but
Okay.
yeah, I do remember it, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually, yeah, I remember dealing with this in the World War One game because,
Mm-hmm.
to like a historian's perspective, Africa and the Pacific, if you were using a scale like that, you would say like
That's right.
there wasn't like 10 million Germans in
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Pacific, but
It's like
it,
one
yeah,
it should be a
okay.
fraction of an infantry as opposed to like three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then it's like in terms of like the rules, I guess. Sorry, I'm in a public
That's all
space
good.
right
That's
now,
all
but
good.
uh, but in terms of I guess I kind of treated it as the like kind of combat power of forces.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
totally. Yeah.
in Africa, yeah. So like in Africa in World War One, I may have an infantry there, but you know, in South Africa,
Sure.
but in British South Africa, there's only like 30 troops. So it's like the Germans have a big advantage, like
Mm-hmm.
so that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
how I treated it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's like proportionality kind of thing. And I think so. I think from the design perspective, a person could, if you're designing neutrals and how many units they should start with, it's like, okay, sure, fine. Iran had 30,000 troops, but they were familiar with the terrain. They had, they're acclimatized to whatever all else. They had, local support and all this other stuff. They can't really factor into the military. So, yeah, they start off with what, 3 infantry? Maybe they should start off with 6 because they had all this like proportionality of advantage where they just got like combat multipliers just by being familiar with all the things that were required there. Whereas the British or whoever comes invades, there's like, you know, is this water drinkable kind of thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe there's all these other factors, like even just local drinking water not making your guys sick. Maybe that's 1 infantry extra. You get the idea. Maybe there should be a little bit
Yeah.
more leeway when it comes to, instead of saying one unit is worth 30,000 troops, you should just be like, it's a unit. Deal with it however you like. Like, come up with your own
Yeah.
idea. We're designing this from the game perspective, and this works, and it's thematically the thing, and we're not pinning exactly what it is on there. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, with Iran, I think of Iran as one of the best examples of how it's really difficult to find the perfect kind of like size of units and
Yeah.
game between its real life thing and how it will work in the game. Because with Iran, like, the second the Soviets and British invaded in like 1941, I think,
Mm-hmm.
they had almost a million men and like
Oh
tanks and
yeah.
stuff like that. But the conflict lasted a couple months because the army collapsed. So
Right. Right.
like
Right.
the various generals said they didn't want to fight
Yeah.
the war. So it's like
Yeah.
the hardness of like you look at the numbers and you're like, wow, they had a really strong army for the time in the area. But like in reality, it really just it didn't work out. So it's kind of like it's like should I set the game up as if following the numbers, or should I set it up as when they were invaded and their army didn't
Right.
do so well? So yeah,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true, and that's difficult to do too because, um, I've always said, like me and Wintermute have said, like France is amazingly designed in Global War 36. Like it's just got that morale feature already implemented in it. Like the nation kind of collapsed because it just and it's regardless of how it happened, it happens, and there's so many ways that you can collapse France that just works out quite well in our opinion. Like you might have a different opinion, so it would be neat if they had a larger Iranian army, but maybe they had a mechanic in some sense that they would also like put down their arms. I don't know exactly how, but something like that.
yeah, I
Maybe now would be a good
yeah.
time to bring up this. I've been thinking about. Well, actually, you know what? Go ahead with what you're saying before I
Oh,
change the topic slightly.
yeah. I think it was. I don't think they kept it in version 3, but in version 2, I'm pretty sure that the rules were like when you captured a neutral capital and the
Yeah.
neutral had a fleet, then the fleet would roll kind of like a Vichy French, um, like kind of thing. And I really liked that because it's like if I think it was capture the capital in the first turn of declaring war on that
Hmm.
neutral. because it
Right.
represents you kind of quickly surprise attack, you storm their capital,
Totally. Yeah.
grab their ships. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
liked that, and
I
yeah,
like that. So if you combine that with some sort of thing like you could redeploy the neutral nation's troops, but also say with their capital if it falls down within, even you could say within 1 round of combat or whatever you want to say, right? Or first turn, but 1 round of combat, then they would lay down their arms. It's also very doable. And that would actually
yeah,
work quite well in the perspective of say like Cold War-esque type of neutral, right? If you had like these, war. Yeah. Anyways, my mind springs to like the Iranian War or something like that, or Iraq War with Baghdad and such, and how it fell. And I'm not too familiar with that period of history, but war didn't last too long in the modern era, just because things move so quick. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So maybe another idea is I have this game I quite like, but it's a beautifully designed game, but really hard to play. It's called Fatal Alliances. I showed you in the preamble. It's The Great War 1914 to 1918. It's World in Flames, Fatal Alliances. They do a World War II game as well, and a few other things. I wish I loved the map more, but the map is actually pretty gross in my opinion. Like, you can't quite see it, but that's
Yeah.
just an eyesore as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't look
Yeah.
good. I don't know. But one of the
I've
cool
never been a
features...
huge fan of hexes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like their diplomacy chart. So all your neutrals start off here somewhere, and you see what the flags are. So this is the Central Power side, and this is the Entente Cordiale side, or the Allied side. And so everybody starts on a different level. And you also have, so for instance, Denmark starts a little bit on the Allied side, but it will also have a number on the chit that you move. So it'll be like a 3, no, it'll be a 4-3 or something like that. Sorry, it starts on more of on the Allied side. And so you roll a dice every time you pay to influence them. You roll a dice, and if it's the number written on the chit or less, then it moves it this way, right? So if it's a 3 for Denmark, it's more likely to go this way. It's more likely to go this way, but more this way. So you have nations that are further away from the Central Powers. It's harder to get their dice rolls to move them in your direction. So certain nations are weighted towards one direction and others towards the other side. And that you get certain bonuses as you cross this line, the first line here, and now you get military access. And then you have, or restricted access. Next one up is rail supply and rebase access. Then you get access to all the resources, and then you could drop your troops off there, and then here you could align them, and now they're fully at war. So all these things, you move them a certain amount on each. I don't remember if it's one time each or how it works exactly. So that's the way that the diplomacy chart works. And I quite like it. It's a good system that works quite well. Everybody has to pay for it, and you get a certain amount of free rolls as well, just the way it works out. But then there's this other center chart, which is the morale chart, which has nothing to do with neutrals. But once they're at war, different nations start at different levels of morale. And for the most part, you start up there, and you drift down. If you lose too many units, you drift down, or if you lose some capital cities. But you have certain like morale military effects start happening here, and morale civil effects. So the first civil effect is partisan values in combat controlled territory increase by 1. So Germany, if it's captured some Polish territory, now those partisans in Poland are a little bit stronger. Partisan values are up by 2, and then the next one up is all non-home country partisans as red. So I don't know exactly. And then there's certain ones that are specific to nations, like South Africa declares independence. Let's see, India declares independence, and this is for the British, right? Partisan values increase and controlled areas are red. And if you go all the way down here, revolution, right? So it's easy to tip them over here. On this side, it's like your units refuse to attack and move. Starts off here at a roll of 1. So each time you go to combat, you roll a dice. And now it's at a roll of 2, roll of 3, and then each combat, before each combat, you roll a dice, and if it's 1, your units just up and surrender. If you're at this level of morale, your units will just up and surrender, right? And everything will drop down here. Now, if they surrender at 3, on a dice 6, right? This is all on dice 6. And your units will refuse to attack and move on a 4 or less. So basically, your units are less willing to fight, and on this side, there's more revolutions rising up. And then if you go here, you just go into turmoil, and you're done and out of the war. So theoretically, in this case of Iran, you could say your guys start off somewhere here, where their units refuse to fight. And that every time you engage their units, they just fold down their arms and say, no, guys, we're done. And you can even put this on, because 36 is a short enough period of time, you could say, like, You could even have 3 different values on there and be like, if the Russians attack, then they don't have this feature. But if the Allies attack, then they drop their arms down on a roll of 4 out of 6 or whatever. And you can have it like a little bit varied depending on if the Axis attack, the Russians, or the Germans, right? Make it a little bit varied, and that way you have this morale element. Regards, like you say, the Iranians put down their arms. But then I also explained the diplomacy and how you get different benefits as things move along. So it's a really cool mechanic. I really like this game. It's just the design of it really artistically sucks, which is why I like Global War 36 so much, because artistically I find it quite beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but those are some pretty cool ideas, though. I definitely like the scale. I remember looking at what was it called? It was a Pax Romana, and it had a similar kind of effect when it came to like morale and stuff like that. And I really liked it.
Neat. Yeah. I think if people should play a lot of games. If you're designing something, you should play a lot of games because there's a lot of cool ideas out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, so we want to talk a bit more about diplomacy too. So let's talk about HBG's expansion for diplomacy. What are your thoughts there?
So I think that, HBG's diplomacy, while fun in the sense that it brings some more, I guess, randomness and action to the games in terms of bringing in those powers that you might not see, like Sweden and South American countries, it kind of lacks in the sense of the way it's implemented, where you just roll your die, and if you get the successes, you move up that diplomacy chart until you finally align the country that you want to align. There's not a lot of, I guess, variables, like things can't fall through. I guess actually, never mind. I think that when you move up, if somebody else is on there from a different alliance, they move down. But it's more of a passive thing.
Wait, sorry, no. The way, if I remember correctly, if it's the same one we played with 1914, there's like a ring with 3 concentric rings essentially in the center ring, and it's a tug of war. Like you're pulling people towards your center, the corner of the pie, and they're pulling it to their side. And whoever gets to the... How does that work? If whoever gets to... No, the outer ring. Every neutral starts in the middle, and you try to pull them to your side. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were talking about the Global 36.
Okay.
Set.
I thought that uses the same wheel, but I guess not.
No, it's a big chart. Kind of looks like the tech chart. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely think that maybe they could do a revamp. Maybe when they release the 1914 game, since it's in development, I'm sure their diplomacy wheel is in development. But that would be really cool for them to release that for an kind of a revamped expansion for their Global 36 game. Because I think that in the playtesting they did, that seemed like it didn't get shown a lot, but it looked like a fun way to do it, where there is like that tug of war. Because in reality, you didn't just send your diplomats over, convince a nation to join, and then they joined. There's other powers trying to convince that nation not to join. So
right. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that they did show it a little bit, because I'm always scared with these things about giving away too much or giving away something I'm not supposed to have given away. So that's cool that you're already a little bit familiar with it and that you've seen it in other people's videos and such. So how did the Global War 36 diplomacy expansion work? How does that one? You said it's a square thing?
Yeah. So it looks like the tech chart. So you've got a big chart and you've got all the little neutral roundels on it. And I think there's 3 stages for each neutral. So you roll, and I forgot the succeed. I think it's like a 1 to 3, and you got to pay for the roll, and you kind of move up the 3 stages until it's fully aligned.
And is it whoever gets to the top first wins kind of deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's pretty simplistic in terms of like you roll a success, you move up. You roll a success, you move up. And then if you have, let's say the Germans are at 2, the British are at 1. If the British roll, they move up, and the Germans move back. So
so there is some tug of war. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's more of like a passive thing, because I thought.
But wait, how come they choose the Germans? Why not would they move, like, say if Russia and the US, no, the Comintern and the Axis were at 1, and the Allies were at 1 too, and then they rolled and succeeded? Do they move those 2 both down to 0? Like they're 2 opponent factions?
I think that might be how it worked. I think it's the whole move down is a lot more passive. Like
Okay.
'cause I'm pretty sure you can't choose. It just kind of everybody moves back, like because
Hmm.
you're moving up. So,
Hmm.
because I think with the wheel, from it was one of like General Handgrenade's videos when he was doing the playtest. It was that you could actually pay, your IPCs, and then instead of trying to like say roll for Bulgaria to get yourself to move up,
Hmm.
you could roll for a different country. So let's say Britain's trying to align Romania, you can roll for Romania and then move the British back. So like
Hmm.
representing you kind of like talking the Romanians out of it. So I
Oh.
liked that you could kind of forget about bumping yourself up and instead sabotage somebody else's
Hmm.
plans.
Okay.
So
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
but yeah.
This wheel, I'm only familiar with the wheel, so I could only comment on that. I found it was interesting, and it seemed I like the concept of it. It's a tug of war, and it's clearly represented on this thing, right? Where you see that that nation's token is progressive on this guy's side, and you're like, ah, no, you got to pull it back and get it on your side and pull it onto your side of the pie, and that was good. But it took so long to do so, right? Like it felt like it was like one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back, right? And what ended
Yeah.
up happening is if you had allies, you'd be like, okay, so you focus on pulling people, like pulling your opponent's allies to the middle, and I'm going to focus on pulling them to my side, because since your allies each had a piece of the pie as well, if they worked on stuff and you worked on stuff, then I think the way that works, if memory serves, I don't think it moved up on either one. It just basically, you could shift them to your side, but that's it. It doesn't go, it wouldn't go up, it just go across to you, and that's it, right? So it wasn't, it was an interesting system, and I think it did a good enough job, but I think there's other ones that do it better, and I felt like a lot of it was like, well, I have to invest into this because everybody else is, and it kind of sucky that everybody else is doing it. So guys, could we all just not do it as much, and then we have a bit more money to spend? Something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's like the
Because
Cold War kind of.
yeah, yeah. I remember with it was long ago when they did like the playtest
Mm.
videos, but like I remember like General Handgrade's thoughts were like everybody was pushing and pulling, and then in the end, like maybe four or three
Mm.
neutrals actually joined because
Mm.
so much was just trying to get yourself up or just trying to pull other people
Yeah.
away that
Yeah.
like nobody really got anything done
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
But I think that's not a bad system. Like it did what it set out to do. But it's one of those things that the more dice rolls, like it's like that partisan expansion for Global War 36. I like the concept of it, but it added so many dice rolls that it's like this actually takes away some of my satisfaction from playing it, because it's just like a sideshow, honestly. But it's a sideshow you have to do because it impacts the game. So yeah, it's good, but I think there'd be a different, better way to implement it. I think it's a better
Yeah.
step than what they do with the Turkey expansion, where it's like a race for whoever gets to the 3 tokens on there first. I find that
Hmm.
immersion breaking.
Yeah. I kind of liked the
Oh
Turkey
yeah,
at
okay,
War,
nice, nice.
like how that was worked. But yeah, I can definitely see how it was. I guess yeah, kind of like how you said, immersion breaking, and like I also didn't like how there wasn't a way to maybe like talk something. You would think that if the Soviets are like one step
Mm.
away from aligning the Turks, and
Mm.
then the French are too, and then the French just snap, they get the Turks. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
I
like
know, right?
it's
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
yeah, like yeah, it is
Like you
definitely
get screwed over by the
frustrating.
dice in some extent, right? It kind of
Yeah,
sucks. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's the nature of dice, though. So my theory is the whole 2 dice aspect, right? When you have a bell curve, and that makes sense because then it's weighted towards the middle, and then the extremes, they don't matter so much. So it's basically a point acquisition, ac- point accumulation, or 2 dice, something like that, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. That's a thought. Well, that's interesting. I like what's been said here. So the other aspect of things are too. So I don't know if we covered this in the preamble or not. I think we might have, but yeah, okay. Maybe I'll say it worthwhile because I think I remember a bit more now. One thing that I think would be interesting is if it was more impactful to acquire a territory by peaceful means as opposed to getting it aggressively, right? And we kind of covered this a little bit with this idea of having, let's say, double the IPP value. So if Germany acquires in a Global War 36 setting, if they acquire Lithuania, then Lithuania would be worth $2 as opposed to just the $1 of the printed value. And you could even say, like, if there's no printed value, like in Latvia, you get $1 as opposed to, let's say half IPP doesn't show up there, but if you acquire it by peaceful means, then you get $2. And I think that would be quite nice to represent. In the diplomacy expansion that I played, so the diplomacy wheel of 1914, they had one cool mechanic where how it was like, the center ring and the concentric rings going outwards, and the first ring would give you a benefit of access to their bases and their ports, and the second ring you'd get an IPP, and the last ring, I can't remember if there was anything on the last ring, but I think it's similar for the expansion too, right? Except instead of the rings, they have the bar.
Yeah, except with the expansion, you don't get any benefits until you fully align them. So,
okay.
Yeah, that was another thing I liked about the ring too, is that you do get those little benefit. It represents you kind of breaking through and getting trade and ports and
Yeah. I think what they should have done is kept it that if you acquire it by peaceful means, you would get, and you could even keep the tokens on that ring. If it's on your side, then you still get that $1 worth of trade. That's something that they could easily house rule in without having to change anything on the board. It's like you acquire Sweden by peaceful means, it's now here, so you get the printed value of Sweden plus the $1 you still get because you have them in your camp. And I think that would be a nice kind of way, a house rule kind of merging those together. And that means it's like, that way Germany's not like looking at stuff and be like, well, I could align Lithuania, but it's only $1. I'll just attack Lithuania and get that buck for, I might lose an infantry, but I don't have to spend like $16 getting it to my corner or whatever it is, right? By the time it gets there, $10 getting it to my corner, and then hopefully I have 10 turns into breaking even. So I think that would be a nice little feature behind it. Yeah, that you have a little bit of an existing bonus. Yeah. Cool. No, that's interesting. So what about yourself? Is there anything like in regards to your game that you're willing to share about diplomacy, or is that still something in development?
With mine, I went pretty simple with it. It's really just because my game's pretty heavily inspired from Axis and Allies 1914.
Oh yeah.
So diplomacy is more of just the printed kind of just realistic political aspect of like either this nation wanted nothing to do with the war, so nobody can align it, and or you can move in. And then also, since I kind of invested into my random event card idea, there is stuff like, say, like Sweden is outraged by British blockades, so if the British convoy raid the Germans, then the Swedish will become pro-German. So it's stuff
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Would you? I know you haven't playtested it. I mean, I think, have you playtested your game?
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Because early on, and way back years ago, when I was working on my Jinx overhaul, as I called it, or JX overhaul, so I had, for each nation, I had specific conditions that they would align. So like Denmark would join if they were blockaded by the British and they had a unit adjacent or something like that. And then the Germans, it was like, Denmark would align if, it was something similar to that, if they had ships all around greater than the Denmark Navy and they had X amount of units. Basically, it was like you overawe them with force of arms, gunboat diplomacy essentially, right? And that would have had different things for different nations. And places like Norway are a little bit difficult because they have more territories, but it's still doable. And I thought that was a reasonable way to do things where you could have an overall rule, but with specific features for each one. So certain ones would be like convoy raiding, like you said. But
there was an expansion set that I've played a few times now that somebody made on the Axis and Allies page called the Nordic modification.
Yes.
And one of them that I really liked was called like the Danish Protectorate rule. And how it would work is you move into so say you're the Germans, you move into Denmark with overwhelming odds, which is easy because they only have militia. And then what happens is you could just choose to kill off the militia and that coastal defense ship, take that IPC, or you can sit there, put your roundel on and everything. The militia stays, and so what happens is I think so now you're getting that IPC value. The Danish, I think I can't remember it exactly. I think that the Danish units stay on the board completely. The Germans move in, they still collect that Danish money,
Hmm.
but they didn't have to fight, and they get, I think, a free SS unit once they go to war with the
Okay.
USSR. But the downside to doing this is that if the British come in and take Denmark, that Danish militia will join that
Cool.
attacking force.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's pretty neat. I like that system.
Yeah,
It's much more
yeah. It,
thematically immersive, right? Yeah.
yeah, it definitely, yeah, it could use some more. I might take a look at that expansion again because I played it with I think 2 games now and I
Hmm.
really like it, but it can get a little like tedious at points.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's the thing I found with my thing is like if you make special conditions for each nation, it can get kind of tedious, right? Where it's like, well, now what are the rules for this one? And yeah, at a certain point, there's just like
yeah,
overload, rule overload almost.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, is there anything you'd like to add?
Uh, they're not exactly. No, yeah, none that I can think of right now.
Okay. Well, that's
Uh,
fantastic. Thanks for joining, man. Yeah, this is good. I like this. So, to those viewers who are watching this on my channel, check out not Wintermute. Oh, check him out too. Check out Cobra's stuff. And if I'm showing up on Cobra's channel, so I say hi.
all right. Well,
Okay.
thanks for having me on again.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'll talk to you. I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye.